Airplane cabins were strange spaces where power, fear, and routine collided at 30,000 feet. On this flight, the narrow aisle felt tighter than usual, filled with murmurs, overhead bin thuds, and the restless energy of passengers eager to reach their destination. A senior black woman named Eleanor sat upright in her seat, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes calm but observant. Years of life had taught her patience, yet also the importance of dignity. Across the aisle stood a young flight attendant named Claire, her posture stiff, her smile rehearsed, her authority newly worn like a uniform that still pinched at the seams. The tension began with something small, almost invisible to everyone else. Eleanor pressed the call button. After waiting longer than usual for water, her throat was dry, and the cabin air scratched like sand. Claire noticed the light and frowned, already overwhelmed by delays, turbulence, warnings, and a supervisor who had reminded her twice to maintain control. When she reached Eleanor's row, her tone was clipped, professional but sharp, asking what the problem was. Eleanor replied softly, requesting water and explaining she felt lightheaded. Claire heard complaint instead of need. She responded with a sigh, mentioning safety procedures and telling Eleanor to wait. The words landed wrong. Eleanor straightened, reminding Claire that respect costs nothing. Passengers nearby shifted, sensing the change in atmosphere. Claire felt eyes on her. Judgment she imagined but believed was real. Her cheeks burned. She repeated herself, louder now, asserting control of the airline in the cabin, as if volume alone could restore her sense of authority. Eleanor remained seated, voice steady, asking why a simple request had become an issue. She spoke of traveling her whole life, of knowing her rights, of understanding patience. Her calm only aggravated Claire further. To Claire, calm felt like defiance. Training videos flashed in her mind, warnings about non-compliant passengers, reminders that hesitation could become danger. Her hand trembled slightly as she gestured, telling Eleanor to lower her voice, though Eleanor had not raised it at all. The argument drew attention from rows ahead and behind. A man across the aisle lifted his phone, pretending to text while recording. A mother hushed her child. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Claire leaned closer, invading Eleanor's space, her words now edged with threat. Eleanor asked her to step back. That request, reasonable and firm, snapped something fragile inside Claire. In a moment that would replay endlessly afterward, Claire's hand moved before her thoughts caught up. The slap echoed, sharp and shocking, louder than the engines. Eleanor's head turned slightly with the impact, her glasses slipping but not falling. Silence followed, heavy and unreal. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then voices erupted, gasps, protests, disbelief spilling through the cabin like turbulence. Eleanor touched her cheek, stunned more by the insult than the pain. Decades of restraint, of swallowing injustice, rose like a wave. She stood slowly, not in anger but in command, her presence suddenly filling the aisle. She looked at Claire, not with rage, but with a disappointment so deep it cut sharper than any shout. She spoke clearly, announcing that the young woman had made a grave mistake, not just legally, but morally. Claire staggered back, the reality of her action crashing down. Training, rules, authority, all dissolved into fear. She stammered, trying to justify herself, claiming she felt threatened, that she was maintaining order. Her words sounded hollow even to her own ears. Passengers contradicted her, voices overlapping, recounting what they had seen. The man with the phone lowered it only long enough to say he had everything recorded. A senior crew member rushed down the aisle, eyes wide as she took in the scene. She placed herself between Claire and Eleanor, asking questions quickly, professionally. Eleanor answered calmly, recounting events without embellishment. Her composure commanded respect. The crew member turned to Claire, whose confidence had evaporated, leaving behind a frightened young woman in uniform. The captain's voice soon came over the intercom, firm and concerned, announcing that there would be a delay upon landing due to an onboard incident. Murmurs spread again, but this time they carried solidarity. A passenger offered Eleanor tissues, another apologized on behalf of the airline. Eleanor thanked them politely, her hands steady, her back straight. As the plane descended, Claire sat strapped into a jump seat, staring at her hands. She replayed the moment over and over, wishing she had paused, listened, breathed. She thought about why Eleanor's calm had felt like a challenge, why authority had felt so fragile. The questions she had never asked herself now demanded answers. After landing, security boarded the aircraft. Procedures unfolded with clinical precision. Claire was escorted off, eyes downcast, career unraveling with each step. Eleanor remained seated until asked to disembark, dignity intact. As she walked down the aisle, passengers stood, some applauding softly, others nodding in respect. It was not celebration, but acknowledgement. In the terminal, Eleanor gave a statement, her voice unwavering. She spoke not only of the slap, but of respect, of how easily power could turn cruel when empathy was absent. Her words carried weight because they were lived, not learned from manuals. Officers listened carefully. News of the incident spread quickly online, videos sparking outrage and debate. Some argued about stress in training, others about accountability and bias. Eleanor watched none of it. She went home, made tea, and sat by her window, reflecting on how a single moment could reveal so much about people and systems. Claire, meanwhile, faced consequences that could not be explained away. In mandatory sessions and quiet rooms, she confronted parts of herself she had ignored. There were apologies she wanted to offer, not to escape punishment, but because understanding had finally begun to grow. The flight became a story people told, not just about a slap, but about the cost of forgetting humanity in roles defined by power. Eleanor continued traveling, still pressing call buttons when she needed help, still expecting respect. She had learned long ago that dignity was not something granted by uniforms or titles. It was something you carried, even at 30,000 feet, even when someone tried to strike it from you. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor received letters from strangers who said they had seen themselves in her calm resistance. Some were young, some old, some traveling for the first time, others seasoned by countless miles. They wrote about moments when they had stayed silent, wishing they had spoken with the steadiness Eleanor showed. She read each message slowly, not out of vanity, but because shared experience had a way of knitting people together across distance. Eleanor did not see herself as brave. She believed bravery implied fear overcome, and what she felt on that plane had not been fear but clarity. She knew who she was, and that knowledge anchored her when chaos tried to shake her. Friends asked if she regretted not yelling, not striking back. She answered that control was not weakness, and that choosing composure had protected her spirit. The airline issued statements filled with careful language, promises of review, and commitments to retraining. Executives spoke about values and respect, about learning from mistakes. Whether those lessons would last remained uncertain. But the public scrutiny forced conversations that had long been postponed. Training manuals were revised, scenarios rewritten, and emphasis placed on listening rather than dominance. Claire attended counseling as part of the investigation. At first, she approached it defensively, arms crossed, explanations ready. Over time, the sessions peeled back layers of pressure she had mistaken for professionalism. She spoke about growing up needing to prove herself, about equating control with safety, about fearing that any softness would be taken advantage of. None of it excused her action. But understanding did not require excuses. One afternoon, she wrote a letter to Eleanor. It took hours, drafts discarded, sentences rewritten. She apologized without conditions, acknowledging harm without asking forgiveness. She admitted ignorance, bias she had never examined, and the pain she had caused. Whether Eleanor would read it or respond was beyond her control, and accepting that was part of her reckoning. Eleanor received the letter quietly, without ceremony. She read it once, then again. She did not rush to reply. Healing, she believed, was not an obligation owed to anyone else. Still, she appreciated the honesty. She placed the letter in a drawer, not as a burden, but as a reminder that growth, though slow, was possible. Life returned to its rhythms. Eleanor volunteered at a community center, traveled to visit family, and continued telling stories to her grandchildren about the world as it was and as it could be. She emphasized self-respect, patience, and the courage to speak plainly. The airplane incident became one story among many, not the definition of her. For Claire, the path forward was uncertain. Her career in the air ended, but her life did not. She enrolled in courses about conflict resolution, not because they were required, but because she wanted to learn. She listened more, spoke less, and practiced pausing before reacting. Change was uncomfortable, but necessary. Passengers who had been on the flight carried their own lessons. Some reflected on how quickly situations escalated. Others questioned how often authority went unchecked. A few reached out to each other online, bonded by a shared moment suspended in the sky. They agreed on one thing, that silence could be as powerful as shouting when used with intention. The plane itself returned to service, seats cleaned, aisles reset, as if nothing had happened, yet the air remembered. Every flight carried echoes of human interaction, unseen but present. Each request, each response, held the potential to affirm or diminish someone's humanity. Eleanor believed that respect was a practice, not a policy. It lived in tone, in patience, in the willingness to see another person fully. She hoped that somewhere, in some cabin, a flight attendant would choose listening over control because of what had happened. Time moved on, as it always did. Headlines faded, attention shifted, but the core lesson remained for those who cared to keep it. Power without empathy was brittle. Authority without humility was dangerous. And dignity, once claimed, could not be taken away by a raised hand. At 30,000 feet, people were vulnerable, dependent on each other for safety and comfort. Remembering that truth could transform routine travel into shared responsibility, Eleanor carried that belief with her, boarding planes with the same calm she always had, trusting herself and expecting others to do the same. On a quiet evening months later, Eleanor sat at her desk and wrote reflections meant only for herself. She wrote about how moments of conflict revealed character more clearly than comfort ever could. She wrote about the responsibility that came with being seen, and how visibility could be both burden and gift. She reminded herself that justice was not always loud, and that endurance often changed minds more slowly but more deeply. She considered the strangers who had stood up in small ways, the murmured support, the shared glances that said she was not alone. Those details mattered. They were proof that decency survived, even when systems failed. Eleanor closed her notebook, content with the knowledge that her response had aligned with her values. Outside, the night was calm. Planes crossed the sky silently, lights blinking like distant thoughts. Each one carried stories yet to unfold, choices yet to be made. Eleanor hoped those stories would be gentler, guided by empathy, patience, and the simple recognition of shared humanity. She turned off the light, ready for whatever journey came next, confident that dignity would travel with her wherever she went. She slept peacefully, knowing that one measured moment had rippled outward, quietly challenging others to pause, listen, and choose compassion, even when authority tempted them to forget the person before them. That hope, she believed, was enough to keep moving forward together.